Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 219. Thank you for joining us. Today, episode 188 guest, Dr. Kevin Majeres, returns to the Kolbecast. As we approach the start of the school year, some of us may be feeling a little anxious, so hopefully you'll find this conversation helpful. Dr. Majeres speaks to us of how anxiety has become more prominent in today's world and the reasons for this uptick. Fortunately, he also offers us advice on how we can confront this and help our children do the same. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and chief homeschooling officer for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How's your afternoon going?
It's going well. We're really ramping up for the start of the school year as we're recording here. And it's rapidly approaching. I can't believe it's mid-July here when we're sitting down.
Right. How did we get here? Not sure. However, the nice thing, as a way of framing it in a positive manner, we got to start our calendar year 2024 with our guest today, Dr. Kevin Majeres. And for the start of our school year 2024-25, we're welcoming him back today. Hi, Dr. Majeres. Thanks so much for coming back to talk to us.
Hey, great to be back with you all. Thanks so much.
You've been looking forward to this. I was thinking of you this past weekend. I'm music director at my parish, and I play 3 masses a weekend. We had the bishop at one of our masses because we have a new pastor. I'm just named a pastor, so he was formally installed as pastor at our parish. So I had a bit of extra nerves going into that going well. So I thought of you and some of the tenets that you espouse and promote and teach us and help us cultivate. On the whole, it went very well. It was lovely. So I was appreciative.
Wonderful. You got some practice.
That's right.
Yes.
So as I referred to, we first met Dr. Majeres on episode 188 of the Kolbecast, so which we'll link in our show notes. Dr. Majeres is, among many other things, a Catholic psychiatrist and a co-founder of Optimal Work. Anytime I list things that folks are, I know I'm leaving out a whole ton of other things. So for folks who haven't met you yet, Dr. Majeres, or who haven't yet enjoyed that episode, would you kind of give us an overview of yourself and of Optimal Work, kind of catch us up a bit?
Yeah, sure. So I am, as you mentioned, a psychiatrist, and I'm also Catholic. Let's see, since 2011, I've been on the faculty of Harvard Med School. And before that, I was on the faculty at UT Southwestern in Dallas.
Yeah.
So those have been like the 2 halves of my professional life. There's Dallas at UT Southwestern, and then here I live in Cambridge. I have a private practice also in Cambridge. And then on the side, I started some years ago now, 2018, Optimal Work with Sharif Yunus, my co-founder. And that's been an exciting project. The goal was, I developed this way, my specialty was always anxiety disorders. And at the medical school, that's what I've always been teaching. So I teach residents who are in psychiatry. So they did med school, then they're doing what's called a residency after that. It's a 4-year program. And I get them halfway through their 3rd year through halfway through their 4th year. And I teach them how to do cognitive behavioral therapy. But my focus has always been on anxiety. I think anxiety is like one of the most misunderstood emotions. It's one of the most mismanaged emotions. And it's also one of the most common emotions. So it has been like, for me, it's been really helpful when I was in residency, to learn. I went to a great program. UT Southwestern was a fantastic residency program. I'm so grateful for them. And they'd really taught anxiety well. And they helped me to get training at the Beck Institute in Philadelphia so that I could be trained by Aaron Beck and Judith Beck. I could do the biggest names in cognitive behavioral therapy. And my training at the Beck Institute was all focused on anxiety. So that's really where my entire focus for many, many years was, how do I get people better faster? How can I, even in one session, cause a complete change in how they're viewing things? And I love doing that. So it's my favorite thing to treat. And you can have enormous gains really fast, but it requires an almost 180-degree spin. They have to, this thing that they've been running from, the emotion, and the more they run from it, the bigger it gets, the more trapped they feel. You have to help them gently in session number 1 to turn it around and open up to it. And as you no doubt said this past weekend, Bonnie, when you were in church, was bring it on.
Yep.
Okay, the more the better. And when people learn to turn in and lean into it, and then especially to set some stretch goal for how you want to utilize all that energy, then it can bring out their best performance. So I had gotten to learn that when people are anxious, they are very close to being at their very best performance. It's one little flip, reframing the anxiety to see that really it's just adrenaline that's there to help you engage the challenge. And if not, you can use it for mindfulness and then it quickly dissipates. So, at any rate, that all led me to help people learn to go from overcoming anxiety to working at their best. And that's what optimal work does. I'm really excited about optimal work because I just released this new kind of masterclass called Overcoming Anxiety, which is a deep dive into everything about anxiety. And I'm excited to see how much it can help people because it's the stuff I've like I dealt with thousands of people now on these topics, so I know what works. And I've been looking for anomalies, looking for when doesn't it work, and I feel like I've gotten pretty good. And so all of that is now available on optimalwork.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you think that anxiety is something that is becoming more prominent these days, or do you think people are just maybe becoming more aware of it?
No, I think it's actually becoming more present. So the incidence is actually going up. It's not just like reporting because we've been looking for decades, at interviewing people in these epidemiological surveys, and you can tell that in fact it's going up. So it's not just more people going to the doctor complaining of it, although that also has been going up. So I think definitely they're both at work, but I think they're both there. So like that always makes people wonder like what's the cause of it? There are probably too many causes to quickly list. There are kind of mindset causes that have happened in our culture that dispose people to become more anxious. There's kind of a behavioral training that's taken place through modern convenience that has made inconvenience and discomfort more and more threatening. So there are a lot more reasons. The more comfortable we get, the more we will tend to shy away from challenge. Anxiety is the urge to avoid challenge. So when we make things easier for people and we make things easier for kids, we do more and more for people, then in fact, they are going to have more anxiety because they've been taught that they can't handle challenge. Challenge isn't for them. So there's best to be minimized. That's just a side effect. But there's also probably many other reasons, and many of which we don't know now. There's reasons like probably the change in diet. I think when you see the worsening diet in like the US population, anxiety levels and other forms of psychopathology have all increased. And now there are interventions where you just change the diet. And in fact, you get substantial changes in psychological functioning. So it's multifactorial. But the fact is, especially younger and younger people are suffering in a real way more and more from anxiety. And that's what I would like to help people with.
As you're saying those things, there's so many, like thinking about how different life is for my children, who are 9 to 20 or so, are much more aware of anxiety and will talk about it to me. But I often think just about the difference in lifestyle from growing up for me when I was young in the early 80s and what was available as far as, like you're saying, the comforts of the on-demand, entertainment or games or whatever. Things were much slower paced. And I don't know I'm sure that's one of those many factors that you were mentioning, but it seems like we've changed so many things in how we operate as a society and even as a family or personally, and without knowing what we were doing, right, over the last 100 years, especially or so, I think.
Yeah.
And that's got to have an impact, I would
Yeah.
think.
I mean, a good book on this topic is Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation. And then he's going through it. There have been others that are kind of similar in that vein, and that are showing that there have been major changes in how, as a society, we view children and how we protect children,
Mhm.
and really, in many cases, overprotect, and in other cases, underprotect. So when it comes to online, kids are radically underprotected. As a society, we could be so much better at protecting children online. It would be easy for us to develop methods of verifying age for children to make sure that dangerous websites and even social media that they wouldn't be able to access before a certain age. But there's just no political will right now to do that. But then kids are way overprotected when it comes to organizing sporting games on their own. We don't let them do that, or being able to be outside playing on their own. So, and it's illegal in many places to let kids do that. And even having older siblings take care of younger ones, you have to be careful of the laws of your state because that can be illegal. So we've gotten really overprotective in some ways and radically underprotective in others.
Kind of overcorrections in some respects, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you think that societally, in general, are you finding more receptivity to discussing anxiety and addressing it? New generations of people become parents and recognize things going on with their kids and themselves. Also, do you find that kind of tide turning a little bit about addressing anxiety at all?
Yeah, I think that probably that tide has been turning for some time now, where there's less and less stigma for people talking about how anxious they are. And to the point where the pendulum has swung so far that now you have generation, whatever the last generation we're on,
Right.
Z, that they're when they're going to work, they will tell their employers and their bosses about their anxiety disorders and how careful they have to be. So there's a little bit now, there's like over reporting, I think, of some of these things. There used to be a sense that in professional situations, you're just cheerful. Like you just be cheerful, you be professional, and that's it. And you don't have to tell the customers who come in through the door how anxious you are. And you have to tell your boss how anxious you are.
Yeah.
So I think that now we're in this interesting mix where I still think as a culture, as a society, we don't really know what to do when people are anxious. Because you don't want to seem like you're being harsh and tell them to, walk it off or shake it off or knock it
Yeah.
off. And so at the same time, we know that if you are accommodating to anxiety, it will grow. So the more you give into it, so it's like, if so now it's the middle of the summer, there's all these summer camps going on. Summer camps are great for kids to get over anxiety. So, it's Jonathan Heidt really strongly recommends summer camps. It always happens that some kids will have separation anxiety, and that's not a bad thing. What's bad is the parents going to pick them up. So you can't, so there have to be, that's accommodating. And if you do that, then it may be extremely difficult to get the kid to ever go back to the summer camp. So parents can be loving. They can be telling people, we've known this for a very long time, actually. That parents should be understanding and know, as they hear the pain, they understand it's painful. They just show complete confidence that the kid will get through it, and then no accommodating. But that's the key, that approach. Yeah.
I can see with even when we think about like the scandals in the church with the priests molesting children or whatever, there I can see as you're saying that as a parent, we kind of I've adopted at times. It's like if they're complaining, it's almost like, okay, we're not going to make them spell out, somebody's doing something bad to me or whatever. Like if they shift at all, we're like, okay, we're, I'm overstating that because of course
Yeah.
there's difficult things in every situation, but I know we're much more aware now of, like, we're looking for nuances when they're talking about anxiety or discomfort and saying, is there something more happening that they're not ready to tell us yet, or something.
Yeah.
So I can see where I can see the effects of
Yeah,
that.
of course. That's great. We want to be able to be better at hearing accounts. And I think we've gotten better at that. That's different than accommodating,
Yes,
where
yes.
you're
Yeah.
like finding a way of somehow giving in. And there's a lot of, so that's good to separate those.
Yeah.
I know in the first time you were here, you kind of laid out the reframing, the mindfulness, and the challenge sort of steps that you we were going through. But I've recently read a book by an author that you mentioned on your website, Russ Harris, and the Happiness Trap, I think,
Hmm.
which was really good because he was reminding, as I was going back, I was reminded of things that you said on our podcast and through the optimal work that, like, you don't defeat these things by forgetting. You can't rewrite the neural pathways or whatever. It's all about building new ones by making.
Hmm.
So at one point we built whatever we've got, but now going forward, it's like you're saying that not reinforcing the anxiety, but seeing it as a challenge, seeing it reframe
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. The Happiness Trap is, in one way, is one of the original books on something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which means for all the pain that we have inside, the best approach is acceptance. And for all real growth in our life, the best approach is commitment. So to be committed to the real ways of growing and then practicing acceptance for the discomfort and the awkwardness that comes along the way, or even the anxiety or the other emotions that can be there. But these are actually the two movements of love. This is in St. Francis of Sales. So there's a motive of complacency in love. Love just takes delight in things as they are. Love actually is total acceptance. And there's also a movement of benevolence in love. Love wants to contribute and to give and to improve. And so there's a sense that when you love someone, you want to help them to grow, and that's the benevolence. You want to help them to thrive, but you also want to just have total acceptance of them the way they are. And really, what's at the core of acceptance and commitment therapy. That there's this kind of acceptance movement and then this committed movement. It's complacency and benevolence. And that applies to oneself, but also applies then to others and how you grow with them. The same thing, as if people are interested, there's something called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is the same idea. The dialect is that you have, on the one hand, accepting things as they are, and on the other hand, changing things to what they can become. And so it's the same exact thing as ACT. So, acceptance and commitment therapy is called ACT for short. And then you have DBT. They're just differently packaged ways of doing cognitive behavioral therapy that pays more attention to processes than the content of thought. Helps people to identify a way of thinking so that they can kind of get unstuck from it. And then to ask themselves, how could this bring out my best? So, and relate to that thought in a new way. And that lays down a whole new then set of neural pathways. But a lot of times people are struggling with thoughts that they have, and they can seem like they're really negative. And ACT is really freeing. You don't have to wrestle those thoughts to the ground and force them to change. You just ask yourself the question, how can this thought, however bad it seems, how can this actually bring out my best response? What would it look like for my life to change for the better as I relate to this thought in a new way? And that's really freeing so that we can really live lives that are defined by the ideals we freely commit to and not to some other dynamic that's determined from our past or our, you know, even whatever it might be, our physiology or whatever. But we can actually have total freedom if we change our behavior so it's according to our ideals. Everything else will come with it in the end.
Yeah, I found some of those. I mean, again, I think this all comes down to the mindfulness nature of this, and I think you mentioned a couple of these terms and I just didn't pick up on them until doing ACT, but like dropping anchor or unhooking, these things where like you're saying, okay, thanks mind. I'm, I've got it, you want me to prepare for this, but I'm working on this right now. So,
Hmm.
without trying to like push it down or squish it or whatever. It's just that, okay, it's there, but I don't need to act on it right now. I can just I'm going to do what I'm doing. And, I just found that really, it seems like a remarkably simple thing to do. But, for me, like when I am at the church and my brain is going all over instead of
Hmm.
focusing on the mass or prayers, those techniques just seem to be wonderful to kind of say, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll worry about that later. I'm here right now, sort of thing.
So yeah, so what mindfulness then would mean is developing this inner space or awareness so that you're aware of your thoughts happening, so that when you're in church and you realize that your mind has been wandering, you're more able to notice that and gently then bring your attention back to the present moment. And that's the movement of mindfulness. You detect the wandering, you let go of it, and then you re-anchor. And those you just keep repeating those things. With repetition, you actually build up the gray matter of your prefrontal cortex. It becomes stronger at doing that work. So it just happens more and more easily that when you sit down in church, you're able to stay engaged for longer and longer. And your affections are able to resonate in your heart for longer and longer. So that you could, for instance, you're praying the rosary, you're praying something, you can let your heart be put, you can let your affection be put into the words and it resonates longer and longer. That's one of the fruits of actually being more mindful. So the ordinary way then that people practice mindfulness, I think, is just slowing down slightly and then redirecting their thoughts. So that they have this awareness. But you can also ask yourself in church, what would it look like for a distraction to really bring out your best? Well, that would mean it would be a renewal of desire, a renewal of love, renewal of could be contrition, whatever it is. There's some way that you can respond that actually is the kalan in that moment, the beautiful, the noble way of acting in that moment. So that's what optimal work is all about, teaching people to learn how to turn everything into an opportunity to recommit to these noble ideals.
Yeah.
And so distractions during a time of prayer or at church are perfect for that.
I just love that reframing where, because the natural instinct is to beat yourself up, like in those
Mhm.
sorts of situations and say, I'm a horrible person for doing this. And then you're just more distracted, and you're
Yeah.
building added pathways, but to turn that around and say, oh, there it is,
Yep.
turn,
And if could you imagine beating yourself up in total interior silence? Probably not, right? It's like some things it takes words to do. And beating yourself up or overthinking things or spinning things more and more negatively in your mind, that all actually takes words. There's something really liberating to finding the power of silence, which your Cardinal Seurat's book is a fantastic book about this. But the power of silence, to put you back in the presence of God. And that gets into the deeper aspect of mindfulness. And that mindfulness is about attending to what is instead of to what is not. The thoughts in our heads and the words, that's what is not. That's as close to non-being as we humans can get. It's like the dreams in our mind when we're sleeping. Like that's as close to non-being as we can get. But attending to what is and letting it hold our whole attention, well, that's actually as close as we get to God because he is the one holding it in being. So by attending to your own being, you actually can experience your being as a lowercase b being held in his being with a capital B. That all being, this is the third way of Thomas Aquinas, all being is participated, right? We are not necessary beings. There's one necessary, and so we're all contingent and we exist only through this one necessary one. So the one thing necessary is being with a capital B holding us in being. And so you have the sense of being upheld, or you could say that we are words being spoken, being upheld by our Lord's word of power, so that we're spoken and he's the speaker. So there's a sense of having your source not in yourself, which we all know we are not the source of ourself, but the source is actually even immediately right now, the source is God. And so that's what mindfulness opens up to us to experience. So you can, so mindfulness, when you bring in metaphysics, becomes contemplation. It becomes true contemplation.
I was having a conversation with some friends just the other, we're actually talking about churches and different architecture and how, the modern building methods don't match kind of the old style of beauty that we really want. And I think we came down to that for the churches that will capture people today, I think, have that silence.
Hmm.
a place to escape from, or to not escape, that's the wrong word, but to go where you can have a space away from the busyness and the noise to just
Hmm.
have that moment of, more easily, at least, to build
Yeah,
that
I
up.
think that's true that a well-designed church does amplify the sense of silence. And I remember talking with someone, she's a voice coach, an instructor, but she had been through some churches in France. And she swore, and I'm willing to believe it's true, that in the churches where there had been centuries of chant, it has left some kind of residue that when you hear chant in those churches, it responds differently than any other kind of substance or materials or architecture or acoustics. That somehow, and you can tell that it's somehow, and who knows? I don't know if this is literally true, but I think I would like to believe it's true.
Yeah.
That just the chant itself shapes, goes into the stones, and over time changes how we hear it.
I love
And
that idea.
she actually wasn't really a believer at all, as far as I
Uh,
know. It was just her belief in the power of chant and music.
Wow.
Wow.
This is a little bit of a diversion, but I know the last time you were here, you were talking about developing with some of your staff a high school program for
Mhm.
books, and I was wondering how's that going, or is that still in progress
Yeah,
process?
it is. So right now, we have a book on the way we're working on, called "The Foundations of the Golden Hour," and it's our first book intended for a high school audience. And it's taking a lot of the things that are in the master class and then just making it more of it's a workbook. So there will be certain ideas, there will be certain inventory items that each chapter, they have like, I think every chapter has two inventory items that get added so that they kind of are building up it's a high school inventory. And then there's plenty of pages for golden hours, and those develop too through the course of the book. So I think that's one way of doing it. We also are, I hope this will come to fruition, that we're working right now with Hillsdale. They have a classical education, like a K to 12 program, and they really are eager to help develop a new master class for high schoolers.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be, they would actually help us with doing the rewriting and doing the filming and production and everything. So I was actually just there at the end of June, speaking to their K to 12 conference. They have this big K to 12 conference every year, and it's a wonderful group to speak to. And they're so responsive to all these ideas. They loved it. There's
Mm.
just there's such a unity of vision between what Hillsdale is trying to do and what Optimal Work is trying to do. Just it's great to see that. I think there's a ferment going on, where people are trying to get serious about giving our best to the next generation and feeling like maybe we're not doing that yet. I know this is what you are committed totally to doing as well. But how do we like give the best materials, the best things, support? And so Hillsdale wants to get this new high school master class into all of their member schools and curriculum schools. So that would mean many, many thousands of students. Yeah, so we're starting how to be working together on that. And my goal would be that by January we would have something. So that's what I'm hoping for.
I mean, what you've done in optimal work it just seems to me that it's something that everybody should go through on some level, whatever, I mean, because the tools are just, they seem like they're such important tools to kind of they're like life hacks, as they say, but they're not
Yeah.
hacks. These are important things to learn how to do. And because it's harder to get a bunch of adults who are off doing things, it would be wonderful to be giving our high school students, where they have to go to school,
Yeah.
giving them some background and opportunity to experience that before they head out into the
Yeah.
world.
And so many times I have heard people say, either like by email or in person, like, I wish I had learned this in high school, or I wish I had learned, like, how many, how much training do you get in school in how to do school? Almost none.
Yeah.
Now, how many classes are there on reading? For all the classes that require reading, how many classes do you get on reading after second grade? It's almost nothing. But reading is a skill that requires continual teaching. And so a lot of times I work with Harvard students all the time, and I teach them how to read. Now, they come here knowing how to read to some extent, but there's a
Mhm.
different level of reading that you need to be able to do to kind of play at a higher level, you could say. So, like, if you're going to be thriving in a very demanding environment, well, then that requires a different approach to reading than what you do with a book you're reading for fun, or that it's like, but they don't have flexible ways of reading. They have just one way of reading. And same with note taking and same with writing. So what I would love is for Optimal Work to be able to teach. I think in the younger you go, the more you teach these kinds of skills as well. What are the best ways to help people practice these things and practice these sorts of skills? One cool thing about Optimal Work I'm also excited about is we have trained our own AI in everything. It knows our master class. It knows every podcast episode. It knows the anxiety class. All the advice we ever give has been put into this AI. So now it's just going to be built into everything in Optimal Work. So when people are going to start a project, then there's a chance where they can set a goal. We can actually now evaluate that goal. How good is it? Is this something that's in their control? Or is it an outcome? That's like some kind of outcome not in the control. Is it something that really is giving them a chance to grow themselves? And what are they developing? Is it a skill? Is it an ideal? Could there be like what's even one step higher? So we can help people refine their goal setting in an extremely intelligent way. And then for instance, say the project is, I don't know, paying your taxes. Well, it will actually then help, if you want, offer all the steps for paying taxes, so that now it's all listed there in 10 to 15-minute increments. So no matter what task people are doing, we can learn from users, but also just from the AI, the data set that they've been trained on, which is the whole internet. We can learn how to do different tasks and help people really come to work at their best with growth goals in any kind of work and any kind of reframing that you have to do. So any challenge you give, we can help you reframe according to like the way Optimal Work teaches people. So it's going to be, I think, a very powerful way of personalizing teaching without making it banal or bland, which is what AI tends to do. So if you try to ask the same questions of just your regular chat GPT, it's going to come up bland. And it's really not that helpful. And so I'm excited, and that hopefully in September will be coming out. As we kind of, and we also have the app now. So on the App Store for Android and iPhone, we have an Optimal Work app. So there's been a lot of things coming up that I'm excited about.
That's great.
Been busy. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on?
The question came up to me at one point, but there are some things that I can't find any person. I can't think of any reason. Okay, let's put it that way. I can't think of any reason that all of this wouldn't be good for every single person. In your experience, are there people? Is there any caveat that you would say that, well, if you have this, or if you're in this situation, you need to be careful about doing this? It seems like it's just universally good habits and practices to do.
I think that the more anxiety people have, the better, because they'll have more opportunities to practice and they'll see more deeply what all the tools in fact are doing, which is helping you to gain confidence in any work. And so they'll feel the gains even more. It's the same with things like attention deficit. I think they will feel the gains more than other people. Because if you look into how do you help people with attention deficit to do executive function, tasks, it's Optimal Work. The stuff you get in Optimal Work is actually the stuff you would do to help people, to improve their executive function skills, so it is actually the best training for people with ADHD. So I think that whatever the deficit is, um, maybe the only deficit we can't really help people with is cynicism. There's no way to help the cynical. That's if I could help the cynical, that would be a great thing. So you try to have solutions that are as usable for everyone, where difficulties make them even more powerful. But some people just not will never do it. Some people will never take work seriously, and they see work always as something bad, something to be minimized. And so they will always be turned off. So particularly, I'm concerned about young men who have just dropped out of education and workforce. They've kind of dropped out of life, and I have no idea how we would be able to reach those. But I don't think I would give up on trying to come up with ways of helping them. You know, maybe it's not optimal work. But I also think that, what we had first on optimal work was a master class on our whole approach, which I think is the kind of it's the best broad-based, kind of broad spectrum cognitive behavioral skills training I could come up with. That also lets you attain flow in any task and kind of master your craft and relationships and ideals. And so I think it's all very solid and very good. But there are not that many people in the United States just, saying to themselves, I need a master class on how to work. So, but I think that when we look at things like anxiety, now we're actually speaking more to a need, and I was just saying in a podcast episode with Sharif, I was joking that, half of the United States has an anxiety disorder and the other half lives with someone who does. So there's just like, it is so common, these things. And not only that, but unless you have antisocial personality disorder, like unless you're a psychopath, you have had painful anxiety at some point in your life. And so that's like the most universal experience. So I'm hoping that that will be like one way for people. But as they go through the anxiety course, progressively more and more, what they're seeing is, in fact, the tools in optimal work are the answer. The reframer, being able to set up projects, being able to do golden hours. So I think they'll see that, like, why it makes sense, why we do those things. And then, so I'm hoping that it'll make people more open to learning this kind of, well, I think it's really just a solid, and to me, it's how I try to live. How do you challenge yourself always to live according to your highest ideals in smaller and smaller tasks?
That kind of gets us to something I was hoping to ask you about in this conversation, and that is sort of the starting point when we recognize, maybe in ourselves, but more so with one of our loved ones in our household, wherever, you get the idea, someone important to us in an initial or acute phase of anxiety, how we can be present to them, validate what's going on for them, like, yeah, that's what's going on with you, and accompany them through that to a state of mindfulness and forward motion, growth in the challenge. What are the initial, not overtures, but sort of what's some of the starting point? What does that look like so that we don't come across as dismissive or patronizing or like, all right, it's like false positivity, toxic positivity, anything like that, where there's that authenticity or genuine desire to be like, I see you right there. You don't have to stay there. Come with me. Let's get to a better place. I'm sure it depends on the context, of course, and the person that we're dealing with, all those sorts of things. But are there any kind of overarching?
Yeah.
Like...
There are.
Okay.
I think there are some things that can be said. I would not be concerned about having the perfect approach in the moment of meltdown. So if someone's melting down, I think you just find a way to be a reassuring presence and to make contact with them so they like know that you understand it's painful, but also that they sense that you're confident they'll get through it.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're giving them space for it to be hard and you admit it's hard. The most painful thing I think can be to be shamed or to be invalidated. So that's what we don't want to do. So as long as you're just staying there and they experience you as a loving presence, you don't have to say the magical words or do the mindfulness. I would think just let them have the difficulty and it's okay. That's from Eli Leibowitz. So he has a book on helping kids through anxiety. And that's his main thing. Are those, I always cite them, but I don't always give him credit for it. But the first thing is that you have to validate how hard it is. The second is you have to show your total confidence that they'll get through it. And then no accommodating. I'm pretty sure I got that from Eli Leibovitz. So also what I really like in this age group is Donna Pincus in her book Growing Up Brave. And she did parent-child interaction therapy studies. And so parent-child interaction therapy is a long way of saying she teaches parents how to be with their children in a completely unconditionally loving way without placing any demands. And usually it's like with younger kids, but it works for teenagers too. But like say playing with younger kids. And instead you don't tell them where to put the blocks. You just kind of you can comment on what they're doing, you have fun with them, you're there enjoying them. It's just pleasant time with no questions, no demands, no commands. And so she has like all her rules that she goes through. I think it's very powerful. In 5 minutes a day is the dose. So you just have 5 minutes a day of this kind of light time together. You're not doing things to get them done. They're not doing no, you're just kind of wasting time together. But that actually is a proven treatment for even severe OCD. So obsessive compulsive disorder. So even for the most significant anxiety disorders, it helps. So that's one, good thing to know. The other thing, in the big picture, how do you help your children to have confidence? Well, one is through direct encouragement. Another is, and so you could say, well, let's back up. One is help them to identify what the challenge is. I think anyone can well, okay, tell me about this. Like, what are you afraid of? What's the biggest thing? So you help them to see, okay, here's the real challenge. And generally speaking, when people are overwhelmed, they see all the steps of engaging that challenge as somehow simultaneous. It's the illusion of simultaneity. And you just help them to lay out some steps and to think about the first step and then make that step even more simple so that you can dilate the challenge for them a bit so that now they can see I don't have to do everything all at once. Yeah, it makes sense. This is scary because you care about it and it's good you care about it. I'm sure you're going to be able to do it. That's showing the confidence. And then you help them very practically to break it into smaller steps. So by doing that, you're actually modeling a whole approach to challenge that we accept that challenges are hard, but we also know it's how we improve. It's how we grow. So you're on a learning curve. That's why it feels so scary right now. But that's okay. This is just the steep part of the curve. The way learning curves work, they start steep and then they get easier and easier. And that's what you're experiencing. So you're there to help them get through the steep part of the curve. And it feels awkward. It feels scary. That's great.
Okay. And that leads to that sense of self-efficacy that you talk about.
Yes.
Is that right? And that
Yes.
kind of helps for the next time, maybe?
Yep. So self-efficacy is how you get it from seeing others model it. So, and that modeling is what you're doing by trying to put your finger on what's the real challenge. What's the scary thing here? Okay, how could this challenge actually bring out our best? Like, what would you most want to be like? Okay, now let's make that happen by breaking it down into steps. So, I think the two most proven ways of bolstering self-efficacy is setting a growth goal within the thing that daunts you, some way you want to grow in the middle of it, and then break it down into steps. Seeing steps, you will feel for each individual step a lot of efficacy. And once you see that that's all the task is, it's just one step after another. You never have to do all the steps at once. So that would be something beyond what we can do. But when you break it down, you can actually feel really confident for each step. And then that allows you to see, okay, I can do that. And this isn't overwhelming anymore.
Okay. And then sort of along those lines, trying to convey that sort of bring it on mentality. I found myself making some kind of course corrections, frankly, about how I speak to challenges that I recognize happening, like how, and trying to introduce some of that. How can this help you grow somehow? Or looks like this is this whatever's happening is meant to help you meet a challenge of something. Anyway, trying to convey that sort of reframing of it being this challenge that when it's up against, ultimately designed for the good. And I think I just maybe I overthink it, the concern that I'm coming across as, uh, or maybe they don't hear it the way I'm conveying it, that they are kind of in a different place than I am with
Mm.
that sort of you don't understand kind of mentality. Like, how do we move past that resistance? How do we work through that?
There's probably no like guaranteed way to work through that, but I would just give them more time.
Okay.
In the moment, they may feel so flustered that but then even if you look at in the end, did they use some of what you were saying? And very often they will. They'll push back verbally in the moment, but then you'll see that they're actually not avoiding the thing. They're actually starting to do the thing. And they might not be quick to say mom was right about everything, but
It's okay.
probably at this point, like in your career as a mother, they haven't like kind of you haven't been surprised by how often you hear mom is always right about everything. So, and same
No,
with dad. So it's like they're just not going to say it.
true.
The other thing is that with family members, they will know, I think, it's easier to feel invalidated, I think, by a therapist than by a family member. Because the family members, like, they might have just a little more trust that, in fact, you do care about them.
Hmm.
And that when they're really in pain, you are really empathic.
Okay.
And if you're at this moment thinking, yeah, I think you can do this. I think this is that they'll see that, okay, maybe it's tough love, right? But it's not, there's mom's just not invalidating me. I think there's a willing when the more deeply you have your own confidence, right, about these things and about helping, and about how to approach challenges, like, and just you start like learning how to use these skills, you are going to naturally be modeling for them, you know, that challenges can bring out our best, that there's a learning curve that we might not know right away how it's all going to work, but if we persevere in it, we will. We will get better and better. We'll gain mastery. So they see you being resilient in approaching obstacles, and I think that is the deep lesson that they need. And you want them to be resilient. So you don't want to like make things easy for them. You definitely don't want to step in and solve problems for them, right? No, they have to be the ones to actually do the growing. So you don't want to short circuit their growth. I think then they'll get the right message.
I feel more and more comfortable saying that, even like it's not good for you for me to do this for you. Like I'm sometimes able to say that,
Exactly.
and they, to varying degrees, they're receptive to that, And so, yeah.
Yeah. I remember there was, I don't know if you remember the DC sniper. And there's someone I knew at University of Dallas, who's he grew up in that neighborhood where the sniper was shooting people,
Mm.
and his he and his I think and a sibling were afraid of standing waiting for the bus outside because it was their neighborhood, and his mom said, "My children will not live in fear. You're going and standing out there." Even like the sniper hadn't even been caught yet. They're still in the neighborhood. And he interestingly, he in the end delighted in that. Now, I don't know if I would have said that. If it was, I don't think I would have done that. So I'm not saying that I agree with the call,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though, but I love the spirit of it, that the mother had the sense that we are not going to live in fear. Now, she probably knew that the chances are so remote, but the gas station where there's a shooting wasn't that far away. So it was like a scary thing, but it was a great lesson. And she thought it was worth the lesson. And he remembered that for years as being the best lesson. And
Wow.
like, I'm not going to live in fear. If I could do that, then I can do X. And then so he like constantly was like not afraid of things as a result of that one moment. So now I'm not saying that they have to be so tough as that, but interesting, he didn't experience it as being invalidated. He experienced it as she was showing confidence that they can do it. And she was willing to set high expectations. So sometimes you have to remember that the high expectations you have are a real gift that will keep on giving. And even if they fail in this one thing, it probably is worth it for them to see that you have high expectations and you know they can do it. And like, and you just don't make it easier for them. You let them do the growing.
Okay.
Now I'm speaking so generally, so I have no idea like
Sure.
what's in your mind on these
Yeah.
things, but hopefully it applies.
Oh, sure. Yes. And I'm sure there's a lot that went into determining an attitude toward a certain situation like that. There's a lot that, of course, a lot of nuance to
Yeah.
coming to the, yes. But I like that broadly. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see as parents, then that's a lesson we need to listen to, though. I mean, as you were going through all that, explaining it, I'm thinking, okay, you've got a child that's anxious about a particular thing, and they might not even see the good that could, so say it's being around people, just this kind of a social anxiety of being, you don't realize necessarily even the fun or the good that you could have if you overcame that. So if you're like, oh, they're shy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to just, if you don't help them to both see the good and make them just stand out on the curb waiting for the bus, it's just going to be reinforced and reinforced
Yeah.
and strengthened until it's hard to ever, I mean, it takes a lot to overcome it.
Well, accommodating anxiety feels like you're helping in the moment, but there's a cost. And because it really whittles away at the self-confidence of the child. Their sense of efficacy that they can handle challenges. There's this great book on parenting that is for children up to age 11, I think, called 1-2-3 Magic by Thomas Phelan. And Jonathan Haidt in The Anxious Generation says this is the best book on parenting. So that's a pretty high praise from Jonathan Haidt. So I'll at least quote him. But the author there, Phelan, he says that basically parents have 3 tasks. The first is to stop obnoxious behavior. The second is to help the children develop good habits. And then the third is to build a strong bond with the child. I think it's a beautiful way of just summarizing like the work of parents so sometimes you just have to okay, if it's for the sake of the bond and you can tell that this is going to be good for your bond with the child, then I think that's always what's most important. And whether or not it's the very correct thing for a textbook for anxiety, it doesn't really matter as much as just knowing your child, knowing and having the bond with them, what do they really need right now? But to the extent that you can be teaching them good habits of how to approach challenges, how to welcome the adrenaline, how to look forward to using it to do their best work, how to even just have a sense of confidence in doing work, even chores, confidence in doing chores, confidence in doing things. So let them get good at doing things that were really hard to get good at, even if it's just around the house and helping. But just have a sense that you're modeling for them constantly work and how to make good habits through practice. I think that's the second thing. And of course, stopping the obnoxious stuff. So
there's that too.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Okay. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with us at this point?
Well, no, in these things, I think there's always so much for us to be learning, and I think that it would be great for us at some point to be talking about also attention. So if we had, and in children and things there, I think that we're learning a lot more now about approaches to helping with attention deficit. And there's a lot of kind of overlap in some ways between attention deficit and anxiety. But I think the common element though, is kind of the task of the parent to show the children an approach to life that's positive and that has real ideals, real beautiful qualities, beautiful ways of stretching ourselves. Those ideals come from the faith and that allow us to see meaning in every challenge that we face, in every difficulty that comes up. And when you're really aiming for an ideal, the difficulties just make it for better practice. So in the end, that's why we can say, bring it on. The more, the better.
Okay. Yeah. Appreciate the time you've spent with us here again this time, Dr. Majors, and all of you have offered to us in this conversation, as well as episode 188. Of course, our show notes have links to these things we've been talking about and related things that have come up. Thanks so much again. And we wish you all the best. And we'll be keeping an eye out for more good things to come from you and optimal work.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Bonnie Stevens. Great talking to you.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.